ARE Podcast, episode number 65.
Welcome to the ARE Podcast. Where it's all about encouraging and inspiring you today so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a licensed architect tomorrow. And now your host, David Doucette.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the ARE Podcast, joined as always with our co-host, Eric Corey Freed. Eric, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm great.
And today we're going to talk about the mindset around design, bid, build. Now, we could spend 3 hours on project delivery methods, but today we're just going to talk about design, bid, build and some things to look for, purposes during the exam or purposes for the exam, and when design, bid, build might be appropriate. So, Eric, how do we want to start off this talk on design, bid, build?
Well, this topic came about because a person in our coaching program had put forth the question of why isn't design, bid, build the answer on this sample question that we had? And she said, I thought design, bid, build was was the go-to approach whenever cost was a concern. That was her quote, and that's what kicked off our conversation about it. Design, bid, build is known as the traditional approach, and it might not be traditional to you. Maybe your firm only does design, build work, right? But in terms of the industry and the way it's written, it is the traditional go-to approach that's been around for centuries, probably, in terms of how we deliver buildings. And it's just as the name implies, there are three clear parts. There's the design phase, the bid phase, and the build construction phase. And never shall the three meet or overlap. And that's kind of the point. Very clear delineation of who's doing what, when. And so the reason it was the traditional one forever was because the thinking was buildings are expensive. Let's seek out the lowest possible bid and then award the contract to the lowest possible bidder who's also qualified, right? That's kind of the traditional DBB or design, bid, build approach.
And one thing I'm thinking right off the top, the traditional part. So, for example, for purposes of the exam, if I have a public project, am I automatically able to assume, well, it has to be design, bid, build because it's a public project?
So public projects, anytime you see a question that even mentions a public project, your first thought should be transparency, right? Good stewards of the public's tax funds, right? So all public projects have a requirement for transparency, so that way they're auditable and we can make sure that taxpayer funding isn't being abused or put to waste. So design, bid, build tends to be the favorite of public projects because you can't just award it to your brother-in-law's contracting firm, right? There needs to be a transparency and openness in terms of who can bid, generally everybody, what were their bids, generally made available to everybody, and who's the winner, also made available publicly. Well, so design, bid, build really fosters that sense of transparency.
Well, also, too, from that standpoint, as you said earlier, there's three separate components. So in the eyes of the public, it's sort of very easy in a sense, in the sense of transparency, to see the three different components. So there's no sort of, almost there's no gray area where things could get hidden in a sense. But that doesn't mean to say all public projects are design, bid, build, though, correct?
No. In fact, the trend lately has been moving towards design build, or more specifically, progressive design build. We did a project last year for a state agency, and this project happened to be their first experiment in using progressive design build. They were very excited about it, and they had gotten certified on it and studied up on it. But the reason they switched from design, bid, build to a design build model was, as much as they liked and were used to the traditional design, bid, build model, it's also slow and and typically leads to a lot of change orders, right? Because you're incentivizing the lowest bid, so contractors often will find opportunities to strip out as much as they can, or things that aren't mentioned in the drawings, knowing that they're going to get a bunch of change orders later down the road. And that's been the game. And I think, frankly, these public agencies were sick of playing that game. So it became less about, we need to find the lowest bid, which could lead to change orders later, and into, we only have a fixed amount of the public's money to use for this project, we want to ensure that we stay within that target. And so design build has been really increasing in popularity lately.
Is part of this change, is it related at all to technology in terms of, whether BIM models or Revit, or just the way we can communicate faster via texting and all of that stuff? Like, we're just used to getting things faster. Does that contribute to sort of this moving away from design bid build?
Well, that's a great point. If you think about it, the move of the entire industry away from traditional design bid build into design build, and certainly I've been experiencing that in my own firm. The technology does lend itself to greater collaboration, but as I always remind everybody, the technology also is means a greater paper trail, right? All of those emails, all of those project logs, all of who downloaded what and when. All of that, if there's a lawsuit, all of that is discoverable, meaning all of that will end up in the hands of an attorney who'll go through it. And so the technology both enables faster communication, faster collaboration, better things, which again really does well for a design build model, but also potentially could mean more of your words being used against you in a court case. So there's good and bad with the technology piece.
So design bid build, it's not outdated. That's not what we're talking about, right? It's not something that's an old, antiquated way of doing things. There's still plenty of projects done commercially and residentially, design bid build, correct?
And always will be, I assume, right? There'll always be a need for this. The way to think about it, and the person in our coaching who asked the question of, I thought you use design bid build when cost is an issue. Cost is always an issue, regardless of the project. I mean, unless you're, even if you have a billionaire for a client, cost is still an issue. I've done projects for movie stars, and cost was an issue. There's always a budget that we have to meet and are expected to be within. So don't think of, one project delivery method as being good or one project delivery method being bad. It's not that way at all. It's more like, look, they all have pros and cons. You choose the one that's the most appropriate for the project. So to me, if I was doing a new ground up house and I knew that I had likely an owner that had never done this before and never gone through a construction design process before and was really worried about the budget, design bid build makes a lot of sense. We can get bids from all the local talent. They're all transparent. We can line them all up and look at them. We can see what each one's spending on drywall to see if we're being taken advantage of in one area or the other. There's a transparency there that's great, but it's also a house, so it's a known entity. The schedule's probably pretty flexible. It's not one of those 10-year long projects, right? It's something that we could probably build in 9 to 12 months. So design bid build makes a lot of sense there. But if I'm designing a new, high-tech lab for NASA, with lots of unknowns and lots of complexity, design build does not really lend itself to that type of project. You're going to want a design build team, preferably a progressive integrated project delivery design build team, to handle all of that stuff. So think about it more as these project delivery methods all could kind of work, but what's the most appropriate given the project type and given the inherent risks with that project?
I think what's interesting about design bid build, I'm thinking back on my years, the 3 years I did design build in LA, and noticed this in the residential world. Some clients, and there was meetings I went to, initial meetings, that they weren't interested in design build. They're like, no, we just want you to do the design and we'll bid it out later, which, begs the question, right? Everybody has their own biases, clients included, right? That they have this idea of, they like the separate design bid build. It's almost like a system of checks and balances, but it does speak to the experience or sort of the building savvy the owner may have. If an owner doesn't have a lot of construction experience or dealing with architects or contractors or any of that, design bid build is kind of a good choice for them. It's kind of, the safer choice in a sense.
Well, you do bring up a great point. The design bid build inherently puts more responsibility on the owner, if you think about it. Right? One of the reasons why clients like design build, the joke that we always make is that it gives clients one throat to choke, right? It's one entity to blame, the design build entity, which is made up of contractor and architect and consultants, right? To go traditional design bid build does put technically greater responsibility on the owner, but it gives them a greater opportunity for fair bidding. If you think about it, construction industry has all these specialties. Finding a great tile person is always a wonderful thing in a region, right? I've got the perfect tile person. She's wonderful. Well, now there's full transparency of what you're spending on tile, and you can really compare apples to apples across the board. But remember, we don't pick the contractor. The architect doesn't pick the contractor. We make recommendations. We can certainly suggest, but that at the end of the day, it's all upon the owner. So the part about design bid build that I think owners overlook is that it's putting the onus on them. We're giving them the information so they can make a decision with a recommendation. But at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. And so design bid build gives you this great transparency, but also gives you longer timelines, a little more responsibility on the owner of who to choose. It's like anything, it's a balance. And is that appropriate for what their needs are? I've had, and you've had, we've had a ton of clients that thought they wanted design bid build, maybe because they saw it in a movie, right? Or that's how they think the world works. So they've never done design build before. And oftentimes in listening to them, we'll suggest, you know what, I don't think you want to go through a traditional bidding process here. I don't think it serves you well. Going with design build could really help address some of your concerns and worries right up front. And so, like for example, with design bid build, that you're getting the transparency of all the costs, but you're getting them up front. Basically, however good the drawings are determines how accurate the bid is. If the drawings don't have a lot of detail, you're going to get a ton of change orders. That's the way it works. With design build, you're basically always working towards, you're like a plane that's off course 95% of the time, but you're always working towards getting to that hole in one, right? Getting to that GMP, that guaranteed maximum price. So we do multiple GMPs throughout the process, even as early as schematic design. Is one better than the other? No, it's just what's more appropriate for the project and for the client, and basically whatever their nerves are telling you they would rather go through.
Yeah, speaking of client nerves, when you think about it and you think about design build, and I guess this goes back to what I was saying about it depends on, the savviness and the experience of the client. Because from going to these meetings, initial meeting, right? Meeting somebody and explaining that I do design build so I can design it and build it for you, thinking like this is great, like everybody's going to love this. But many did not, because they didn't really have construction experience or haven't really done an addition or remodel to their home. So from their standpoint, somebody coming to their house and at the first meeting and being like, yeah, I can do all of this for you. Now, some love it. Like, hey, you're my only point of contact. Great. Till the end. Others are like, no, let's just do the design part, and let's just, kind of take it slow, right? It's much more of a slower relationship, which is kind of what design bid build is as well. It's a slower process.
Well, it's funny, when I was doing residential at the beginning of my career, the majority of it was design bid build, right? I had the relationship with the client. I was doing the hand holding. I was taking them shopping for tiles and sinks and all the other fun stuff of residential. I was the one suggesting, hey, here's 5 contractors that we might want to interview. I would often have them interview first before asking for a formal bid. But by the end of that residential work, it became much more about negotiated bids. We were doing less and less of like sending out packages for bid, and more of, you like that contractor, you have a budget, let's negotiate that. And then I started doing more and more of design build, where the contractor had the relationship with the client and said, we need you to design. So when I was in Palm Springs, for example, my best friends were these 2 contractors, the green guys. You can look them up. They're fantastic. They would have the relationship, and they're like, we have a great architect. Why don't you meet him? The roles were completely reversed, but it was great because as I was doing the schematic design, they're like, no, dude, they can't afford that. And, we're not going to pop that up. Like, get it out of your head. It was great to just have their voice, peering over my shoulder as we were kind of working through design concepts. And so we were showing better schematic design, I think, that was more in tune with their budget and less chance for change orders and less chance for overages. So again, there's no perfect model, but that was all within doing the same thing of like houses for rich people. But it was quite a journey that I went on, and part of it was more just my comfort with going away from the traditional model.
I mean, it definitely takes a more experienced architect to work in the design build realm, right? And for all the reasons we talked about. But we had a couple minutes left. So I want to bring it back to the exam and the ARE and the mindset of that and design bid build. Like, what are some things we should be looking for in terms of design bid build and why that may be the correct answer on however it may come up on the exam?
Yeah, it really goes down. Your mindset should be less a way of memorizing that design bid build equals this or design build equals that, and more of what's appropriate. And so based on the question, pick out the clues in the question and where they're leading you. If the question is alluding towards wants to find the lowest bidder, design bid build alarm should be going off in your head. If they want to get a transparency of costs, like a public project, design bid build should be kind of coming up as a strong option. If the question, however, says they want to finish it as quickly as possible, it's a complex project, it needs an integrated approach, design bid build should be going down now on your list, right? It's really depending on what the clues in the question are really pointing you towards. So use the clues in the question, specifically the adjectives and adverbs, and they should be painting a picture of which one would be the most appropriate. Keeping in mind, with project delivery methods, any method could kind of work. You could force any project to go through a design bid build process if you wanted to. It doesn't make it right. It's really using the clues in the question to lead you to the right answer. And so for DBB, it's going to be, I want that transparency of cost. I need that transparency. I don't care if it takes longer. There is no overlap between the design phase and the construction phase. They are separate, distinct phases. Then design build is perfect for you.
Along those lines too, the design bid build, any kind of question related to, like we were talking about earlier, an owner who's kind of this is their first construction project or their first time doing this, and if the question's not specifically saying, hey, it's their first time doing it and they want it done fast, which I don't think we would get something like that. It's going to be more like, hey, this is their first time doing it. They have some concerns and, here's the project. Well, that's design bid build, right? Because it's their first time, they're hesitant. It allows them to sort of, slowly go through the process and kind of have that checks and balances where the architect is not the contractor, which again, to somebody with not much construction experience as the owner, that's a huge commitment, right? So I think all of those you said were good. Okay, you're not saying anything, so we must be out of time.
I thought you were wrapping up.
I was wrapping up, but then I was going to throw it to you. But yeah, I think we're at 15 minutes. So with that said, we are going to wrap this one up on design bid build, and we will cover the other project delivery methods in future episodes. So on behalf of Eric Corey Freed, my name is David Doucette, and we will see you guys on the next episode of the ARE podcast.
Thanks for listening to the ARE Podcast. Be sure to visit architectexamprep.com and check out our other podcast episodes, video tips, and the ARE blog. Remember to plan, practice, and pass.